Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Mayor Jim Strickland tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We'll talk about as much as we can get to because there's a whole lot going on, but I wanted to start with the statues and the meeting at the Historic Commission, the Tennessee Historic Commission last Friday. Did not go as I think you wanted, a lot of people, the city council, a lot of activists wanted. But tell us what happened and tell us what happens next, because it's not over by any stretch. Yeah,
we basically had two petitions. One was turned down and one was set for a hearing sometime in November. So the fight still continues. We wanted the first petition to be granted and disappointed by the vote, and frankly disappointed by the vote total. It was pretty overwhelmingly no. But our second petition, they said, hey, we agree with you. We think it should be heard by an administrative law judge, and we're going to do it in November like you requested.
And that administrative law judge will be in Nashville? Is that
we
correct?
assume in Nashville.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, something may have happened the last couple of days, like setting it or who the judge was, and I don't know it, but we assume in Nashville.
Is that like a circuit judge or a chancery judge? What is an administrative, you as a lawyer, Jim Strickland lawyer right now, what is an administrative law judge versus another type of judge?
It's a appointed position by the governor, and they hear administrative matters, probably some employment matters in the state, and we filed this petition for emergency relief, saying we have to have an answer in 60 days under the law. And they said, yeah, you're right, there is a provision for that. And the commission could have heard it themselves, or they could have asked this administrative law judge.
Do you feel better? I mean, when you're dealing with a group, what the historic commission was 23 members, 30 members, a big group, right? Is it better to be in a legal arena? Is that a more comfortable place? It might be a more comfortable place for you, but is it just, do you feel like the city's interests are better heard in that sort of arena, or?
I don't know. I don't know who the judge is.
Okay.
I feel totally comfortable with the situation. I thought we made a great presentation as a team. We had citizens there, we had business leaders there, we had a group of ministers there, we had a lot of city personnel there, and I thought as a team we made a good showing.
All right. Bill.
So after this hearing, Mayor, the City Council this past Tuesday basically approved an ordinance that, to my eye, lays out a whole lot of other options, legal and official actions that could be taken that range from closing the park down, the city taking that action, to taking the plaza around the statue of Forrest and basically creating a memorial to lynching victims around it. So it seems as if this is about to go broad, and kind of the plan that you've had is what is moving into view at this point.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, though, in the short term, for sure, the council and I are on the exact same page, that we ought to go forward with this hearing in front of the administrative law judge and try to get this thing resolved in November. After that is what they've proposed, these different plans. I've not really had time to absorb that. I'm not sure closing the park. I understand the sentiment, but if you close the park, you still see the statues, and they're still there. Putting other statues and memorials up, I'm very open to that. I'd still like to take them down, but I appreciate the engagement.
So the administrative law judge is going to hear the city's case that basically the city does not have to have the city believes, your administration believes, that the city does not need a waiver from the Historical Commission to move and relocate this statue.
Yeah, that the specific issue is the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue is not a war memorial. A war memorial is a term of art that's used like the Vietnam War Memorial. It's dedicated to that war. This statue is dedicated to an individual, and we believe that that cannot, as a legal matter, be a war memorial.
You've heard from people who say, well, why can't the city simply act now, take bold action now, and let the courts sort it out later? The goal of leaders of that movement is to have this statue down by the April 4th, 50th anniversary of the sanitation workers' strike. And that's also your goal in this.
Yeah. You know, it's real easy to say, Bill, you need to go break the law. Eric, you need to go break the law. It's easy for me to say that. The reason that they're not taking down the statues is because it's illegal and they would be held accountable. But it's okay if I break the law. We're not going to break the law at City Hall. I've said this countless times. To do this, imagine to do this, I as mayor would have to order about 24 city employees to break the law. Because Jim Strickland cannot operate the machinery and pick that thing up and then transport it. So I'd have to order public works employees to break the law, and then I'd have to order policemen to break the law and ignore what we were doing. That's outrageous. That's absolutely outrageous, and I'm not going to do it. In fact, those employees could sue me if I did it. They could be held accountable by law, thrown in jail, and punished, and I could be too, and we're not going to do it.
So one of the points, though, that Lee Harris has made, state senator, former city council member, is that could a city employee be charged with destroying city property if they're a city employee? If the city owns the statue, is it possible to charge a city employee with destroying property?
Absolutely. What if a city employee took a sledgehammer and just started beating up the Brooks Museum building? He's a city employee. That's goofy. That's just goofy.
To the people who, I mean, the people who want you to move faster are very vocal right now, and I think you agree with their sentiment. I'm not with this reality that you should break the law. I hear fully what you're saying, but you've said from day one, I want them down, I want them down. So there's no argument about the end game of whether or not the statue should come down. Have you heard from many people, and I've said on the shows, we've talked about this, I haven't heard from any public officials, people on Facebook maybe, people around, who want them to stay up within Memphis? Do you hear from people? Do you get emails from people? Do you get calls from people? Well, their argument is what? Is it that it's the history, we're destroying our history?
Yeah, oh yeah, I think it's a minority view in the city of Memphis, but there are Memphians who don't want those statues moved. One of them, I believe she lived in Memphis, was at the Tennessee Historic Commission. She at least taught school in Memphis. I think she lives in the city of Memphis. But yeah, there's no issue that we deal with, including wearing a pink tie today, can I get unanimous opinion on in Memphis. It's just any issue you talk about. So there are people who don't want the statues down. There are people who want me to break the law and take them down tomorrow. I think, though, most people agree with the tact we're taking, which is follow the law, let's get them down in the long term, and get them down by the April 4th.
We will move on to something, but do you worry, and I've heard other people talk about, April is too far away because the legislature will be in session in January into February. And the legislature has tremendous authority, far more authority than a lot of mayors and a lot of city councils would like over all kinds of things, including potentially these statues. So do you feel that is a deadline that the legislature going in session?
That is definitely on our radar.
Yeah.
That we understand that the state legislature disagrees with our position and that they could try to attempt to change the law to make it even more difficult. So that's on our radar that they start in mid-January.
We're focused on the Forest statue, the statue downtown, Robert E. Lee in what is now, Fourth Bluff Park, yes, overlooking. What's the status on that one? Where do things stand?
We're really more focused on the Forest statue, but we do have our eye on the Jefferson Davis statue. And again, the goal is to try to get them down by April 4th.
Okay, look, we'll move on. I mean, obviously a lot more going on with that. We'll move on because there's a whole lot of other things going on, including this past week, announcement of riverfront, vision for the riverfront. The riverfront task force that I think you appointed, I believe in the spring.
Yes.
We have some folks on, Jennifer Oswalt from DMC and Kevin Kane on next week talking about that. But it's a big, bold plan for the Brooks potentially to move down to a site right on the bluff, an aquarium, an aquatic education center, changes to the convention center. It's a $550 million plan. This is not brilliant at the basics in the sense of the way you ran and the way you've talked for the first year and a half you've been in office. And I don't mean that as a criticism, but your mantra has been basics, potholes, police, services. This is a whole other side to your administration or an opening in your administration that we haven't seen as much of.
Well, first of all, I think I can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I really appreciate the Daily News. It's going to be the Daily News Aquarium. I appreciate the commitment to a multi-million-dollar donation.
We're working on that, yeah.
No, but we're still committed to being brilliant at the basics. And if you notice, and frankly, very few people understand our operating budget, our CIP budget, and the TDZ. But I'm very committed that our operating budget and our CIP budget, what we pay police and pave streets, that is focused on basic core services. We're not going to use our normal, what I'll call our normal budget to do these extras.
The property taxes I pay and other people pay.
Yes. We're not going to use that to do these extras. But we have this TDZ money, which is extra money. And basically, in short, it's state sales tax. Money that would go to the state for their purposes, we get to keep in Memphis to develop tourism. We're going to use those dollars to do this riverfront development. We're already using them for the pyramid, and that's how we redid the pyramid for Bass Pro. And there's extra money on top of that, so we're asking the state to say, hey, you've given us permission to use it in the Pinch, the Convention Center, and the pyramid. There's so much money, we want to do stuff on our riverfront. So would you give us permission to do stuff on the riverfront? So that's going to be the city's portion. I don't want anybody to think, though, that we're breaking ground on the Brooks Museum or the aquarium tomorrow, because most of the money would be privately raised. So we have the state money, but most of it's going to have to come from private sources.
Are there commitments on the private end of that?
No, and it's a little frustrating from my point of view. I'd hate to get this stuff out and then, I like to have it all tidy and then make the announcement. But the whole TDZ process does not allow that.
Which has to be approved by the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the state to approve it, we have to give them specifics on what we want to build. So that's why it's kind of gotten, the horse has gotten out of the barn before we have it all neatly packaged.
And do you worry, before I go back to Bill, do you, there have been so many plans for the riverfront over the years. I mean, when you appointed the task force, I think I said to you, one more task force.
I saw your eyes roll.
Yeah, I mean, and I think do you think that's a little fair? I mean, people going, oh great, one more task force, one more plan, one more beautiful vista kind of drawing. And again, even as you're saying, there's these great ideas and these and the Brooks has talked about what it could do and so on. But is it just one more plan that isn't going to come to fruition? Do you worry that that's the case?
No, I don't worry about it. But on the other hand, this is not all finished. And when I first got elected mayor, I went to the Kennedy School. They have a new mayor's school. And one of the people said that the process by which you get from point A to point B is oftentimes ugly, and it doesn't look good to the public, and that's kind of where we are. And at the end, that's where I need to be held accountable and judged. What are we doing at the end? We will do something on the riverfront. I don't know right now if we'll be able to raise the private money for a Brooks Museum or an aquarium, but there's other plans that I think more green things, improving our parks, that we certainly can get done.
Bill.
But Mayor, being able to pick something out of what is a much broader plan with a lot of different moving parts to it and say, yes, we want a pedestrian bridge from the southern end of Mud Island with an aquarium to a new Brooks Museum on front between Union Avenue and Monroe. That has a catalytic effect, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, on one hand, I know I'm saying, well, we haven't done this yet, but on the other hand, I'm really excited because it would really be a positive transformation for downtown. Mud Island is so close, but so far away. And that's been the problem since it opened in the early 80s.
Well, and also there has been so much talk about the potential of the island, and people have very different ways and opinions about tapping that. So kind of walk us through your thought process, because this could have been pretty involved and it could have gone, you know, dozens of different ways, and you settled on something that seems to add some big elements to it, but yet keep the basic mission of the park there.
Yeah, because the bones of the park, I think, are pretty good. You talked about people contacting me about the statues being for the statue. I get a lot of people contact me about they really like the river walk. You know, the model, the scale model of the river. Even there's defenders out there of the museum. The problem with those things is they look exactly the way they did in the early 80s, because there's been no money to be able to spend on that. So we keep that the amphitheater, which is a great place to watch a concert. It's just so dated. The bathrooms are bad. The stage is too small for shows right now. So we keep those basic elements and improve them. But you can also put an aquarium out there, which I think the aquarium in Chattanooga draws 600,000-700,000 people a year. That's basically what Graceland draws. So we're adding another sort of tourist attraction that could basically double what Graceland does. Draw people out there so more people can enjoy the scale model of the river.
So talk to me about private money, as in private development, specifically on something like the aquarium, because I think sometimes when I see private and philanthropy together, I go, okay, well that means private donors who aren't necessarily philanthropists, but you're talking about private development or leveraging this for private money in some cases.
Yeah, either way. I mean, if you break off private money from philanthropic money, we take either one. Paul Young, who's sort of been the mastermind of all this and has done a really good job at it, brought in an aquarium expert, and that's even an understatement. This guy is really good and has built aquariums all over the world, some of the best ones across the world. And his team, and there are people who would invest money, private investors who would invest money into aquariums because there is a return on those aquariums. So that's a possibility. It's also a possibility that people would just donate money, specifically maybe for the Brooks, which is a nonprofit entity.
Do you worry though that, and you said Paul Young, the head of Housing and Community Development, has been on the show. Do you worry that, okay, you build the aquarium and, then there's another city amenity that is fighting for dollars? I mean, can it be self-sustaining? Can it, Mud Island was supposed to be, the park was supposed to be self-sustaining. It clearly has not been. It's a drain of something like $1 million a year on the city budget, somewhere around that, depending on how you calculate it. Does that worry you?
That is a concern, and I've seen some initial numbers that the aquariums across the world really do sustain themselves. That is, the oncurring operation and maintenance is something that needs to be kept in mind, and we will keep that in mind.
Who will run all this? And this also brings up the fact, Benny Lenderman, longtime head of the Riverfront Development Corporation, has been on the show before. He announced his retirement, I believe it's in April or something like that. Right. Who will run these? I mean, the Brooks, I assume, will be run as it is now. It has its own board, it's a city amenity, but these new amenities, say for instance the aquarium, and I know there's this kind of mixed space that you're in, but I mean, people have talked about the zoo might run it. Would it be RDC running it? Would it be a whole new entity?
We don't know yet for sure. That's the honest answer. It's going to have to be someone who's an expert in aquariums, which could include the zoo. Yeah. We have one of the best zoos in the country. I would love if they were involved. If not, then there are people who are experts in running the aquarium.
But it's not something where you're going to have an appointed, someone in your cabinet is head of the aquarium.
No, Alan Crone is not going to be running the aquarium.
Crone was on the show. What is the future of, all this vision for the riverfront, what's the future of the Riverfront Development Corporation? And who picks their next head? Are you involved with that, or is that their own board?
Yeah, the RDC is a standalone nonprofit.
Okay.
We contract with them to do certain things, maintain our parks on the river and that sort of thing. But they are standalone. They have their own board. So that'll be their decision. And this is so new that I'm not even sure they thought about it. Benny has been if you think about it, the riverfront is better off now than when Benny took that job. And Benny deserves a lot of credit for that.
Let's move on to some of the basics and so on. One of the, obviously, you ran on what a big priority for you has been getting the police force back to something like 2,400. I think it peaked at around 2,500. Where are you in that process? You had a class graduate. Where we stand there?
We graduated at 85 in August, which was a big success. We started another class with about 100. I expect approximately 80 to graduate from that class in January. Then we started another class in April. We celebrated that 85 that graduated, and then the next day you think, well, we got to do this 6 times in a row.
Yeah.
We got to graduate 80 to 85 or more 6 times in a row. So I suspect in January when this class graduates, we'll say that we've brought on more police officers in 2 years than in the prior 4 years combined. But we're still a long way from where.
And that gets us, before I go back to Bill, that gets us to
we're
around
at
2,000?
yeah, that'll put us over 2,000. But then naturally you have attrition. There's officers who retire and leave and that sort of thing. And we have slowed down attrition. The 2 years before I was mayor, we lost about 185 officers per year. My first year as mayor, we got it down to 150. This year, I think it will be lower than that. I'm not sure exactly where, but we got to slow down the attrition, retain officers, and recruit them at the same time.
Bill.
Mayor, it doesn't get more basic than sewers. And since the last time you were on, you put out an order. I don't know if it's called an executive order, but in effect, the city has made the decision: no new sewer connections for developments outside of the city that don't already have an agreement with the city. Talk to me about your thinking on that and what prompted that.
First of all, cities don't usually provide services outside city limits. I know it's shocking, but we don't build parks outside city limits. But traditionally, Memphis has built sewers outside city limits because they knew they were going to annex those areas. And that's been happening for 40 or 50 years. Well, now that annexation's over, to me, the logical next step, and remember the state legislature and the county commission took away the city's zoning authority. We used to have zoning authority 3 miles outside the city limits. Well, the state legislature and the county commission took that away. So if our authority ends at our city limits, our responsibilities ought to end at our city limits. I made a mistake, though. I made that decision without really consulting enough people, and I take that. That's my.
And that was,
I'm 100% responsible.
Heidi Schaefer, chairman of the county commission. That was her criticism, that we've got projects in limbo. We've got projects 70-something, I think she counts, that are now, and that, yeah, maybe they are outside the city limits, but economic development in the area helps the city. So you said that you made a mistake in terms of how do you fix that mistake?
Well, what we're doing is I've met with every developer who's asked to meet. It's only been 4 or 5. And what we've done is the Office of Planning and Development came up with that list of 70. And our legal team is looking at it. And if we are legally responsible, if we're legally have to extend those sewers past because of detrimental reliance or literally a contract, then we will do so. And we hope to have an answer on that on the legal side sometime in November.
Is this issue a kind of a gateway issue to larger questions about what the city does and its relationship to what happens outside of the city limits?
I guess, we want to be, Memphis, I think, ought to be looked at the same way these other cities are. Very few of the suburban cities are extending sewers outside their city limits. Now, fire and police on an emergency basis, all the cities cooperate and will go outside their limit. But on normal police patrols, police don't go outside the limit. Most people, including the people who live in the unincorporated parts of the county, support our decision. it's just a handful of others that are involved, and we're going to deal with them on a case-by-case basis.
Does this get into issues of de-annexation? I mean, of orderly versus forced de-annexation?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I don't know if they're directly related, but they're tangentially related. We're still pursuing the de-annexation of about 6 neighborhoods. We're going to hopefully get the state legislature to agree that we can get that done. And then I got to convince the city council that that's the right thing to do too.
With just a minute or so left, 2 quick things that we could talk about for an entire show. The fairgrounds, what's next with the fairgrounds and what's going to happen there?
Our goal is by the end of the year that I present a plan for the fairgrounds to the city council and then get approval to go to the state on a TDZ application for that.
Totally separate than the other TDZ that we
Yeah,
talked about.
and the fairgrounds TDZ, so people know, is the last TDZ in the state. You know, they go from Dollywood to Nashville to Memphis. That'll be the last one.
And then again, we could spend a whole show talking about this. The Amazon pitch, you were quick to say when Amazon announced they wanted to do a second headquarters, Memphis should be in the running. Right. To the people who say, oh, that's a waste of Memphis time, they don't have a chance. I mean, there's some people who've written that and said that. Right. Your response to them is what?
Well, a lot of people thought my wife would never marry me, and that was a pretty good bet, but somehow I convinced Melanie to marry me. Why wouldn't they come to Memphis? We are home to 6 Fortune 1000 companies. FedEx, one of the best companies in the world, is based here. We have a lot to offer, and I think we'd be a perfect fit for Amazon. All
right. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry we ran out of time. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.
Had a group of ministers there. We had a lot of city personnel there, and I thought as a team we made a good showing.
All right, Bill.
So after this hearing, Mayor, the City Council this past Tuesday basically approved an ordinance that, to my eye, lays out a whole lot of other options, legal and official actions that could be taken that range from closing the park down, the city taking that action, to taking the plaza around the statue of Forrest and basically creating a memorial to lynching victims around it. So it's
Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Mayor Jim Strickland, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We'll talk about as much as we can get to because there's a whole lot going on, but I wanted to start with the statues. And the meeting at the Historic Commission, the Tennessee Historic Commission last Friday, did not go as I think you wanted, a lot of people, the city council, a lot of activists wanted. But tell us what happened and tell us what happens next, because it's not over by any stretch. Yeah,
we basically had 2 petitions. One was turned down and one was set for a hearing sometime in November. So the fight still continues. We wanted the first petition to be granted and disappointed by the vote, and frankly disappointed by the vote total. It was pretty overwhelmingly no. But our second petition, they said, hey, we agree with you. We think it should be heard by an administrative law judge, and we're going to do it in November like you requested.
And that administrative law judge will be in Nashville? Is that
we
correct?
assume in Nashville.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, something may have happened the last couple of days, like setting it or who the judge was, and I don't know it, but we assume in Nashville.
Is that like a circuit judge or a chancery judge? What is an administrative, you as a lawyer, Jim Strickland lawyer right now, what is an administrative law judge versus another type of judge?
It's a appointed position by the governor, and they hear administrative matters probably some employment matters in the state, and we filed this petition for emergency relief, saying we have to have an answer in 60 days under the law. And they said, yeah, you're right, there is a provision for that. And the commission could have heard it themselves, or they could have asked this administrative law judge.
Do you feel better? I mean, when you're dealing with a group, what the historic commission was 23 members, 30 members, a big group, right? Is it better to be in a legal arena? Is that a more comfortable place? It might be a more comfortable place for you, but is it just, do you feel like the city's interests are better heard in that sort of arena, or?
I don't know. I don't know who the judge is.
Okay.
I feel totally comfortable with the situation. I thought we made a great presentation as a team. We had citizens there, we had business leaders there, we had